Women of Reddit, what's the most ridiculous thing a man has ever tried to explain to you? Story 1. This guy tried to explain to me once how a penis has a bone in it. He was being dead serious. And I was confused as to why he thought that considering he has one. Regardless, he didn't believe me when I told him there's no bone. Story 2. A dude tried to explain how a piece of software worked once. He told me all about the history of the project, that it was his idea, and why specific decisions were made about it. His historical account was wrong. His assumptions about why the code works the way it does were wrong, and when I told him I wrote the software, he made me prove it. When I proved it, he still maintained that I was wrong about the history of it. It was honestly such a weird thing to lie about and not back down from it. Story 3. My brother tried to explain how periods work to me, a woman, when I was in my early 20s. He is not a doctor. When I told him that his idea that periods are something you can switch off if you don't want them by having better control over your body was wrong, he called me a feminazi. Story 4. A different one. IKEA chickens for a while. Q dude telling me they wouldn't lay eggs without a rooster. This man, who had never been near a live chicken in his life, was walking among my flock I had kept for years, educating me. Edit, I did not expect this to blow up. I will now add that this man was my father, so basically Coffee's childhood in a nutshell right here. I was in my early 20s for this little episode though, haven't seen or spoken to him in over a decade. Carry on. Story 5. That I pee out of the same hole from which I push babies and receive dicks. On and on we went, me providing increasingly detailed delineation of female anatomy, him shrinking physically and verbally till he just grunted, slack-jawed, and walked away shaking his head. He was a man in his 50s. Story 6. That I can control my period and make it stop. Edit. While this thread really shows how schools fail at their job of educating children about how our bodies work. Story 7. That the pain of childbirth is a myth and women have learned helplessness. I asked him, oh, are you an OB-GYN? Nope. Are you any kind of medical professional? Nope. So I say, why do you believe that millions of women in all parts of the world are just pretending that childbirth hurts? He says, oh, I saw this article online and the title was about, which is when I interrupted him to say, you didn't even read the article. You saw a headline and immediately believed that over the experiences of every woman who has given birth. I was about 8 months pregnant at the time and basically lost my. Story 8. I once got into an argument with a man online in an ancestry group. I happened across his attempt at mapping a family line of my mother's side, so I have a different surname with a completely different country of origin, that also was somehow connected to him. He was livid when he saw that one of the people in this family line was recorded as having died in New York. When everyone knew she lived in San Francisco her whole life and had no family recorded in New York, he went ahead and made a public correction to the family line, while grumbling about how people really need to check sources. When I corrected him, saying that she really did die in New York, while staying with her daughter and her daughter's family, he so kindly explained that I was a moron, except I was there when she died in New York. She was my great-grandma. I was a preteen at the time, and he absolutely refused to believe me, even going so far as to claim I falsified her death certificate. I legitimately can't figure out why he was so emotionally invested in her, and to this day my family and I have a running joke where, when anyone goes anywhere, the store, vacation, work, etc., we feign anger and shout, check your sources, moron. Story 9. While living in Oregon, a white man once told me, a black female from the South, that I have no idea what it's like to be a black woman in the South. He then proceeded to explain the troubles and hardships to me. Story 10. That I only had morning sickness because I was conditioned to believe that pregnant women were supposed to, and that I was able to control if I really wanted to. Story 11. What an Americano was, while I was making it, at Starbucks, then I proceeded to tell him the history of it and he tried to argue that it was French, not Italian. Story 12. As a midwife, I have at least one scenario every time a question like this is posted on Reddit. The amount of men who feel threatened when in a situation dominated by women is too high. Just from last week, a man tried to correct me when I was helping his wife to breastfeed. Tried to tell me that milk came out of a hole in the middle of the nipple, like a urethra. Men telling me I can't put a catheter in when the baby's head is low in the vagina, whilst I am in the process of putting a catheter in. Men telling their partners to push, and then me telling them not to because they're not fully dilated, and then the men telling me it will make them dilate faster. Men telling me not to top up their partner's epidural and explaining to me how epidurals will stop the baby coming out. My favorite is when a bloke tried to explain my own shift patterns to me. Like, bro, what are you even trying to achieve here? Men need to learn to sit down and shut up. When a professional is telling you something that doesn't concern you personally, and you also don't know anything about, just don't say anything, or ask a question. Edit. So far the count of mansplaining to me that it's not only men who explain things beyond their comprehension on a thread asking about women's experiences of mansplaining is 3. Congratulations to those people for being the most dense. Collect your stickers and participation awards. Story 13. My ex-100 tried to explain to me how I peed out of my vagina, because according to him, semen and come from the same hole, and therefore pee and vaginal lubrications come from the same hole too. This was back before Wikipedia, so I had to get out a college textbook to show him that the urethra and vagina are different holes. Then he tried to tell me the urethra is inside the vagina, which makes it the same. I should add that we were raised very conservative and had never even had with me with the lights on, but still, how can you not know that at 19 years old? Story 14. That I don't know what a child with autism needs and couldn't possibly know the best way to take care of them, then went into detail about why I'm wrong and he's right on things like autistic children can't pick up their own toys and adults have to do it for them. His words. Not mine. I have a degree in special education. I'm also his wife. You know, the woman he asked chose to raise his kids. Story 15. At an air show, two guys tried to explain to me that there were no women flying military aircraft in World War II, and why they didn't have the right temperament to fly those planes. My mom was a pilot in World War II. Oh, what a fun day that was. Mom was cool. Story 16. I will never forget this incident. In the 9th grade, my high school health studies teacher tried to explain to us how tampons and periods worked. This man looked us dead in the eyes and said, yes, the cotton will absorb the sin that you bleed, but it will also make you impure and your future husband will be unsatisfied with you. That's private Catholic schooling in the Midwest for ya. Story 17. My boss explained to me that Excel can do calculations. He then offered to teach me how to do calculations in Excel. All of this is occurring as I'm trying to show him the Excel sheet I made to calculate my data, and explaining that the entry is too time-consuming. We need to find a better way to handle data. A few months later he called me a naughty girl when I brought in cupcakes. His boss, the CTO of the company, stroked my back for a solid 15 minutes once during a process development meeting while I actively scooted away from him. I'm a nearly 30-year-old research associate. I'm just tired. I'm so deeply tired all the time. Story 18. When I was in my mid-20s, I spent the night with a man. I just slept there after a party. My parents were disheartened. My dad took it real bad, and explained how, at work, the women all talk about virginity is so important, and how it is important to choose the right man for a woman's first time and how I should have done better. Really, in a police force, the policewomen will discuss the importance of chastity and choosing the right man for defloring with their male colleagues. In a liberal, progressive society, in the 2010s, when they lost their virginity decades ago, sure, right? And then he kept on talking about stuff that are important to women, according to women, with absolutely no regard for my opinion because it's what the other women at work say and how come, if you don't feel that way, other women feel the way I say they feel. Story 19. My dad tried incorrectly to explain how mortgages work. When I said I already knew, he said, how could you know that? I was a real estate agent for years. Story 20. Some dude once tried to tell me you're not an adult until your 30s, and he basically grew up in the span of a week. Said something along the lines of he went partying last weekend, but he's done with that because he's an adult now. He said that after he found out I wasn't a partier, he was like 32 and I was around 21 or 22. The way he spoke seemed like he was interested trying to impress me, yet told me I wasn't an adult. To be fair, he was an overall ridiculous person. Story 21. My coworker, who I lovingly refer to as RJ, meaning rape joke, when I am talking about him to my friends, once explained to me that since I have turned 30, my cycle, meaning my period, I don't think he even knew what he meant, is going to expire and my eggs would dry up soon. He goes on to explain how women's hormones sync with the moon and environment around them. This is why women in countries like India have more children. The woman's uterus is closer to the moon in countries further north from us, and their periods are like tides and produce more eggs. I asked him to further elaborate and he said he didn't want to talk about gross stuff like this anymore. He now has a 1-year-old daughter. This is one example. Anytime he is late and I call him out, his literal response is, well, you don't have kids. I usually respond with nope, just hella disposable income. Welcome to the sales world, bro. Story 22. Some man doctor tried to tell me that it was normal to have period cramps that double me over, make me puke and diarrhea constantly. Since the uterus was inside, I told him that my mother's and sister's uteruses were inside too and they didn't have these symptoms. He just shrugged. Weirdly enough, the painkillers he prescribed worked. I still don't think it's normal though. Story 23. Why younger women need older men in their lives to teach them about, as it helps them blossom into a flower. I was being groomed into having with my mom's then boyfriend. Even sent me emails to articles that proved his point and links to books as well. Had known me since I was 14 years old. I had just turned 18. That my breasts couldn't possibly be larger than a DD and that cup sizes didn't get larger than DD and those were reserved for watermelon-sized breasts. I went into painful depth explaining how bra sizing actually works and how messed up a lot of it is. But also how a DD cup can be smaller than a C cup depending on band size, and he would just not believe me. Like, dude, I know what size bra I'm wearing and it was professionally fitted and also that fits. Story 24. This happened tonight. He tried telling me that when women get horny they can't help themselves and need to just or masturbate ASAP, hence why all women cheat. Got offended for some reason when I told him that we aren't animals. Story 25. I'm an art professor. I was leading a group of students through an art museum. This is often hilarious because random tourists will eavesdrop on follow me, thinking they're getting a free insider tour. They're not, but I get a kick out of watching them try to be sneaky about it. An older man wandered over and interrupted me to regale me, and the students with his unsourced, unsolicited opinions on Freud, which he thought were somehow relevant to the 16th century painting we were looking at. Story 26. A recent one was at work for me. I'm a waitress and I was cleaning dishes off of tables when someone else's customer waves me over to him. By the time I make it to his table, just him, he had laid his head flat on the table, and he was staring intensely at a table in another coworker section. Need anything? Points at table in the distance with his head still on the table. You ladies aren't cleaning these tables very well. Oh, well, that one's still dirty. Someone just he picks his head up and cuts me off. You can't see it from your angle, but there are cup rings on all of the tables. Spoiler, there aren't. Do you want me to wipe your table down? No, mine's fine. All of the others are dirty, though. He then proceeds to explain and demonstrate in the air the proper motion to use when wiping off a table. I was trying to manage my facial expression so I didn't come off rudely, but I must have came off as confused or something because he got frustrated and tried to repeat his spiel on how towels work, so I shot him a sorry about that, I'll make sure to tell someone, and left. Story 27 that I only got my period during the full moon. I tried explaining that werewolves and women are different, but he insisted for a good 20 minutes that he was right, ignoring the fact that I'd been getting my period for years and he still had yet to get his. Story 28 when I was starting to hit puberty, my dad used to try to explain why biologically women should shave their legs and armpits and men shouldn't. Nothing he said made sense. All of it turned back to, well, why won't men do it then? Well, because men don't. Then why do women? Because it's cleaner if it's cleaner. Why don't men? I just walked away after a while. Story 29 that there's no way I'd bleeds so heavily that I'd have to change my pad every hour through the night, that I could just put a towel down and it would be enough. Then he decided to Google in front of me and pull out the old women lose no more than an egg cup blah 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 bullshit. He's my manager in work and one of the most arrogant antagonistic pricks I've ever met. Okay, so I'm editing this to add a little more info about our relationship, seeing as people are getting quite worked up about it. As I have explained to a few people, he and I have worked together for 7 years, since this store opened. We also used to share a house together and have been through a lot with each other, from the store almost closing and fighting to getting it back up and running, to our own personal issues such as my deteriorating health, our family problems, breakups. We talk a lot, we've had our ups and downs, fought like cat and dog. People joke we're like an old married couple who are kind of stuck with each other now and just making the best of it until one of us dies. He's been there for me and I've been there for him. He can still be in at times though, and I imagine I can be too. Story 30 so I once said salad at a bar during a toast, and a former friend said actually it's salud with a D. Reader, I'm Italian. Edit, sorry I forgot the E at the end. Salute health. Folks are pointing that out. Was typing quickly. Also he definitely thought I was aiming for Spanish. We were all drunk, but the comment was peak that guy. Story 31 I finished a combined honors in applied math and chemistry. Analytical and inorganic were my specialties. I had a guy at a party try to explain atomic orbitals, but like the high school way. I explained that it was just a simplified version based on the smaller atoms, and that they get more complex past the first 20 elements due to more electrons and protons. He scoffed and told me I didn't pay attention enough in chemistry. He was doing a philosophy major. Story 32 I broke up with my smug no-old boyfriend this week. I managed to say I think we should break up before he took over. 5 minutes later, after he finished up by reassuring me we could still be friends, he was finally done mansplaining my breaking up with him. A guy tried explaining this channel where they spoke about different sports and the people who were on it and how sports talk is a guy thing. Never really disappointed him by saying I actually used to be an intern there. Story 33 breastfeeding. I nursed my first longer than most moms, who recommends up to 2 years. My daughter was 2-ish at the time of this story. My brother-in-law was really upset I was still feeding her, made a couple comments to my husband about it, before finally confronting me while I was nursing her. Apparently I was only doing it for attention, and he thought I might have been getting off to it, that no child needed to be breastfed past 1. Oh, and improbably turning her into lesbian because of it. Story 34 during a seminar about women in the workplace, the leader opened up by asking what we, a mixed group MF, thought were challenges for women. The first person to speak was a man, and he thought it was probably dealing with our hormones and bringing our relationship problems to work. Story 35 when I was in college getting my BFA in studio art, I worked as a stage carpenter in my school's theater. I started doing it in high school, so by the time I was a senior, I had a few years' experience. I had a friend who was a student in my school's conservatory, and his senior project was an opera that he wrote with another senior. At the beginning of the year, he asked me to be the set designer and TD for the show. It was a smaller production, and I had a few other students that I took on to help me, so I said yes. Fast forward to Tech Week the week before the show opens. Between runs, I went to the nearby hardware store to pick up a few things that I didn't have on location, including a cheap brush for touch-ups. So, even though I'm dressed in obvious carpenter clothing, jeans with lots of worn areas and completely covered in paint, steel-toed boots, etc., I'm a girl in a hardware store. Part of me always expects an employee to ask if I need help, because hey, it's their job. And also, I'm a girl in a hardware store. Most of the time the interactions are pleasant, but a few times I have definitely been treated like a girl who knows nothing. This time, I'm running in and out. I've been to this hardware store before, and I know exactly what I need and where it is. I get to the paint section, and step back from the row so I can see what they have, while I weigh what brush will work best for what I need at the cheapest price. An older man who is not an employee is in the same aisle. He asks me what I'm looking for. I'm in a bit of a rush, and I don't need help, so I give a kind of non-answer, something like just a paintbrush. This man proceeds to tell lil old me, with paint in her hair and on her clothes, about the different types of paintbrushes, and starts making suggestions to me, even though he has no idea what I need it for. When I reach for a cheap touch-up brush, he proceeds to tell me the colloquial name for it, and that it's a cheap brush that you can just throw away after you're done. I'm still completely baffled by the way he talked to me, like I was unrecognizable as a professional. I know this isn't even that bad when it comes to being a woman in a hardware store. Can y'all share your stories too so we can bond over this? Story 36. A now former coworker tried to explain the entire Star Wars expanded universe now Legends to me. He assumed I had only seen the movies since I said Luke was my favorite character, shut it down by quickly mentioning Tahiri was my favorite EU character and asking his opinion on the new rebellion. He left me alone after that. Story 37. This wasn't me but a friend. We study in a very male scientific field and we had a bet for who could find the most well-formed garnet during a field day and our professor would judge. So a bunch of people are betting and my female friend says that she wants in and one of the guys looks at her says, you know, if you enter this bet you have to pay actual money, right, like real money. She responded, OMG. What? Really? I didn't know that's how betting worked. Luckily the other guys in our group are good guys and immediately started ripping him a new one for mansplaining betting. Story 38. How to tighten lug nuts. As I'm giving the last one a final turn with a torque wrench, having changed my flat tire all by myself, exhausted after an extended overnight shift and really not stoked on the experience. He sprinted to me from across the parking lot, took the wrench from my hands, and proceeded to look so pleased with himself after he ineffectually gave each one a go. I was so tired that I didn't even say a word, just got in my car and drove away. I hope he plays through that scene in his head sometimes, realizing what a dumb spectacle it was. Story 39. Guy tried to explain why it was impossible that I, a woman, could enjoy the experience of playing RDR2, apparently because it's a cowboy game with guns. That means that I am incapable of enjoying running around on a horse saving friends and robbing banks because girls don't really like that, do they? He was trying to make me say that the whole reason I beat RDR2 was because I wanted male attention. Because apparently a woman can't just like a video game purely because it's fun to play and has a great story. We're different from men. Men have complex thoughts and women only think about lipstick and... Story 40. One of my hobbies is archery, and I shoot a crossbow, 10-point Titan SS 175 pounds draw weight. Anyways, at the range, I once had a butch hunter dude really try to tell me how my crossbow worked, how to shoot it, and it's okay if I can't, because ladies just can't do that. The look on his face as I made eye contact with him, pulled back the 175 pounds without breaking a sweat, and fired that arrow in barely even a second, hitting the direct middle of the target. Priceless, I tell you. He then only spoke to me to clear the range. Also, I was 16 when this happened, had been shooting a crossbow for 2 years, am now 20. Got a new 10-point last year. Story 41. The women's fashion industry. He was dropshipping 5 leggings and lingerie from China, without branding, with a site right out of 1998. I was a marketing consultant at the time. Story 42. I'm a stripper and I get male customers telling me how to do my job all the time. You should be talking to points that guy over there. He looks lonely and like he's got heaps of money. Actually no, that's a regular that comes in every week and never spends anything, but okay. You need to smile more and act more flirty. From the same guys that won't tip and refuse to even buy you a drink. Story 43. That civilization started in ancient Greece. I inquired if he meant that the achievements of Greece achieved a standard hereto unknown of civilization. Nope, it was cavemen before Greece. He was very proud of this knowledge. I played along. Story 44. That vaginal discharge was abnormal and I definitely had cancer. This was promoted after I told him I changed my underwear twice a day. I'm usually an argumentative person, but at that point I couldn't say anything else. Oh, and that you can't rape your spouse, since marriage makes you one under God or something. This came after me telling him that it's legal to rape your wife husband in my country. Story 45. A guy told me that being kicked in the hurts worse than giving birth. I don't think anyone has ever been able to test that theory, but if you've ever watched someone be kicked in the versus watching someone give birth, it's not hard to figure out which one hurts worse. You're literally pushing a small human out of you. Story 46. My ex-husband thought he knew more about the female anatomy than I did and attempted to educate me on more than one occasion. He said I needed to wash the inside of my vagina, so he shoved a bar of soap up there and surprise. Yeast infection. Before I got the test results back he kept telling me I was disgusting because he assumed it was an STD flaring up. Story 47. Ex-boyfriend tried to explain to me about my internal penis. You know, the one at the end of my vagina. All girls have an internal penis, he told me. The rest of the English-speaking world calls it a cervix. Poor homeschooled kid. At least he knew what a penis was, I guess. Story 48. My ex tried to explain to me that you don't have a period while pregnant. He truly believed that was a brand new thing he discovered and couldn't wait to share the good news with me. Story 49. I became a TV producer at a young age. I had a small crew and we were hired to film behind the scenes on another production. I didn't have an assistant, so I took care of getting on camera releases from the other crew, the one we were there to film. One of the camera operators refused to sign, telling me he was part of the actors union and he wouldn't sign without his agent. That's cool, I get it, so I announced to my crew to avoid filming him. He called me over and explained to me how to do my job next time. The right response would be to go get your producer and have him handle it. I looked him dead in the eye and said I am the producer, and did it feel good to see him go white as a ghost. It's a small industry I work in. He shot himself in the foot that day, my own research twice. Story 50. My friend's now ex tried to convince me that I was a black person in brown. I thought these were one of his stupid jokes. Not only was he being serious, but my friend joined in, and both went on to try and convince me that I didn't know my own skin color. Story 51. I am a specialized translator from English to French and I have a bachelor's degree in translation. A man who did not study translation and is intermediate in English, tried to explain to me how I did my translation wrong. I then explained to him how 3 words in English can be translated by only 2 words in French because in French one on the 2 words carries 2 meanings at once. Just because you speak a little of another language does not make you able to translate it. That is why. I studied translation for 3 years. That guy does not know enough English to have a conversation. Classical example of a man who knows nothing about my job field of study and tried to explain to me my job field of study. Story 52. So, male here, I started to explain laser therapy to a client the other day for their dog. I got about 2 words in and she immediately said I have a PhD in physics, specifically lasers and optics. It definitely saved me from one of these situations. Story 53. I can't tell you how many times I've had men explain how to use simple power tools to me. My friend sarcastically informed me later that I have to have it explained because menstruation wipes my memory of tool usage every month. Story 54 was talking to a guy on a dating app. I mentioned that I get asthma attacks when I run in cold weather. He responded with that's actually called exercise-induced asthma. Really, you don't think I know the name for a condition I've had since childhood? Story 55. I was putting gas in my tank at the gas station, and a man told me that my placement of my gas cap was wrong. I was like, what? And he came over and haughtily told me you need to put the gas cap in the holder while you're pumping or else it will ruin the paint on your car. Then he comes over to show me, and yeah, there's no holder for my gas cap when it's off. I sat there and let him fumble around for like 5 minutes looking for it before letting him realize he was an idiot. Then he said something to the effect of, well, most cars have it LMAO. Okay dude. Story 56. One time a man tried to explain to me how if he was a woman, he would have it super easy and would use his looks and vagina to get everything he wants. Story 57. I love my dad. And this story isn't even that bad. When I was a kid and teenager, I had fairly long curly hair 3A that got frizzy-messy easily. My dad's solution to this was just brush it. Story 58. Atheism. I've been an atheist since childhood. He knew this, but was apparently filled with the euphoria of a new convert. I cut him off pretty quickly. I don't have time for that nonsense. Atheism is extremely uncomplicated and I don't really want to sit around talking about how I don't believe in things. Story 59. That I didn't really had vaginism. It wasn't even a real thing for him. I just didn't had with the right dudes and it wouldn't hurt if they knew how to properly do it and make me wet. He also said that the pain was in my head and that I could stop it by tricking my brain. I just had to make an effort. Needless to say, he didn't get laid that day or any other day because I stopped talking to him after that. Story 60. Right before a trip to London last year, my dad mentioned needing to exchange some cash into euros. I told him we'd actually need pounds, but he was adamant about how the UK was a part of the EU, therefore it used euros. I started to explain that the UK wasn't in the Eurozone and never had been, but he cut me off saying, I was just there 2 years ago, you've never even been. I minored in economics in undergrad and was in the middle of getting my master's in international affairs. Our visit to the currency exchange was fun. Story 61. We were watching a movie and I guessed the twist ending. He looks at me and decides to explain the ending to me, which was what I had just said to him. I was dumbfounded, but I listened to him restate what I had just said and then explained the concept of mansplaining to him. He got all pissed off and for the next few days he worked mansplaining into whatever we were talking about. Yeah, we didn't date long. Story 62. I manage restaurants for a living. One time, this guy ordered a soup to go. When I gave it to him, he told me that the soup is larger when he orders it when he's dining in. I explained to him that it's a 5-ounce portion. The bowl just looks larger when it's for dine-in guests because that's how it's designed. He argued with me for long enough that I got the 5-ounce ladle and brought it full of soup and an empty soup cup to go. I ladled it into a bowl for dine-in and then into the to-go soup cup and he still didn't believe me. He refused to leave, so I went to get him another soup to go on the house to get rid of him. The male manager I worked alongside asked what I was doing, so I told him and he went and just told the guy that's the same size as when you eat it here, and the guy thanked him and left without the extra soup, because all he needed was another man to say it. Story 63. This will get buried, but I'm a female assistant editor for film and TV. It's a very technical job, requires a lot of organization and experience. You work side by side with the editor, and above both of you is a post supervisor who manages the department. Post supervisors are almost always wannabe editors that failed up. They have technical skills but usually no drive or creativity. They are almost always excellent at letting assistants do their work and solve their problems and taking the credit. They are also excellent at sidestepping blame when something goes wrong. I've never met one I liked. At any rate, I'm on a job and the soup is probably the biggest tool I've ever met. Plus, he understands jack all about the workflow. At one point as we're finishing a movie he asks to the open office why a film is split into 20-minute reels during finishing. I explain it's so minor adjustments can be made at the last minute to one reel without affecting others. I can't believe I have to explain this to someone who has supposedly done for 20 years or whatever. A few days later he's giving a producer a walkthrough and I overhear him explaining that he's guiding us through the important step of splitting the film into reels and why it needs to be done. A few days later, that producer calls me and explains to me that another movie of theirs is entering post and how important it is to split it into reels. The kicker was a pre-production meeting on the next movie where that post supervisor started explaining to me what reels were, and that's the film industry for women. Story 64. I do the New York Times Sudoku every morning to get my brain going. They normally take me about 30 minutes, My coworker came up and asked about my Sudoku puzzle. I told him I do them every day and he admits that he has never played Sudoku before, then he has the gall to explain the rules of Sudoku to me. I look at him dumbfounded and he says, well, at least I think those are the rules. I don't know though. I've never played it. Story 65. He wasn't exactly explaining but definitely making an assumption of which he didn't know anything about. A guy I had never met before offered to let me use the telescope my colleague maintains and he could get me some good data with it. It was a telescope that I had co-written the grant to buy, had been using for years, and was using remotely from my computer as he was saying it. Story 66. In my grade 12 biology class we had to draw and label male and female reproductive systems. The list of things that had to be included had the clitoris, and a boy in my group insisted that it was at the bottom, by the butthole. When I corrected him, he insisted that he would know to me, a person with a clitoris. I say there, literally speechless, jaw dropped for a good 30 seconds.